You can support this podcast for $3 a month at patreon.com/Copytraders Club. Or find me on eToro, username Gavin Macaulay, and add me to a watch list for future content. Thanks for listening. Copytraders Club, where you can learn how to make better decisions and more money copy trading. I'm Gavin Macaulay, by name and username on eToro. Today, we talk to a go-getting Kiwi adventurer and investor whose eToro journey has not exactly started with a bang. Here we go. Season 2, Episode 42 of the Copytraders Club podcast. And as always, my aim as an eToro enthusiast is to demystify this new and uncharted world of copy trading, understand what are the pitfalls and best practices, and how ultimately to succeed as a copy trader. Today's chat is a little bit different because our guest is not yet a PI, but he has a growing following on YouTube, where he catalogues his exciting and inspiring life story as the Adventurous Investor, aka Neil Denize. And he approaches. Neil, hello. Welcome to Copytraders Club.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me on, Gav.
Delighted to have you on. And as a listener to the show, you know that you've got to get past security. And to do so, you have to answer a series of quick-fire questions.
Yep.
Username on eToro.
Neil Denize.
Date you joined eToro.
July 21.
Date you became a popular investor.
Yet to be there yet.
Year of birth.
1985.
Place of residence.
At the moment between Japan and Australia.
Profession.
Self-employed.
Briefly state what you aim to achieve on eToro.
To ultimately beat the market, ideally.
Name one of your investing heroes.
This is a tough question. I'm going to go with Monish Pabrai.
Name one of your favorite investing books.
Also, in the same tune of Monish Pabrai, I'm going with the Dando Investor.
That completes the formalities. Let's proceed into our VIP section here at the Copytraders Clubhouse. Neil Denize, are you ready for this magical transition?
I sure am.
Okay, Neil, come through. Take a seat here on one of these splendid sofas. Can I get you a little drink? A little red wine from Marlborough or something?
That would be good, but I might just get a beer.
Yasmin, can we have 2 beers, please?
Nice.
Okay, so this is interesting for me, and it'll be interesting for the listener because you're an unusual guest in many ways, insofar as you're not a popular investor, as you mentioned in the quickfire questions, and you're not a copier.
That is correct.
So let's talk about that.
Yep.
I suppose let's start with why are you on eToro? How did you come to be on eToro?
Mainly from you, actually, Gav. You were the one that sort of introduced me to eToro, let's say. I had heard of it. They advertised quite heavily in Australia. I think it was in 2020. They were pretty heavily advertising. And I briefly had a look, but I already had a number of brokerage accounts. But then after you sort of introduced me to it, I took a look and was definitely keen to get on board.
Now, we're going to talk all about your experience of it so far and your journey and your goals and all the rest of that. Let's just fill in a little bit of background about who you are. You are the Adventurous Investor.
Yes.
That's the name of your YouTube channel.
Yep.
And you indeed have had an incredibly adventurous life. This is all part of the reason why I thought your story would be so engaging on eToro.
Nice.
Let me fill in a little bit about you and then you can build on it. You started off investing in real estate. You've got quite an impressive real estate portfolio in various countries, including a couple of ski lodges in Japan. And you built a tiny house in Tasmania made from 2 shipping containers.
Yes, that's correct. You've done your homework.
Already in those few sentences, you've ticked off a few people's one-day dreams. So you're a real achiever of things. Tell us a bit about your story and where do you get all the energy to do all this stuff?
I'm always pretty busy. I've always have been, to be honest, even as a kid. I have quite an active mind, let's say, which is almost a downside sometimes, bit of a downfall. But yeah, I'm always pretty busy doing whatever I'm doing and always pursue things that I've generally enjoyed doing as well, both in careers and both just in general life as a whole. Always been quite fortunate with a lot of jobs and things I've had in the past, and always sort of been quite lucky to be able to do a lot of things that I've enjoyed. I've travelled quite extensively, predominantly through my 20s, and then now sort of trying to set our lives up so we can allow us to travel and still enjoy some time in the mountains here in Japan, whilst also sort of bouncing between Australia and Japan, and even try and get back to New Zealand when I can to see the family back there now that borders are all open everywhere, which is fantastic.
Yeah, so you've got a couple of ski lodges in Japan. One of them, at least, is in the Miyako area.
Yep.
Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, no, bang on.
Okay.
Japanese.
And it's a place which gets a lot of heavy snowfall. So does that mean it's primarily for snowboarders or skiing and snowboarding equally or what?
Yeah, both, definitely. I mean, Miyako, or just Japan as a whole, doesn't have crazy steep terrain like you would get, more in Europe and North America and that sort of thing. But they do get snow, especially here in Miyako. Last season, we got just over 20 meters over the period of the whole season. So that's a lot of snow in a short space of time. Like the season only really kicks off from about mid-December and sort of finishes around sort of mid to late March. So there's a fair bit of snow in that sort of small time period. And yeah, we have 2 lodges here now. And then we've recently just bought a little commercial space in the last few months, which we're going to set up to be, not too sure yet, maybe a rental as a ski and snowboard rental, and maybe a little cafe as well. Possibly Airbnb upstairs as well. There's a few options there. A lot of renovation going into that next year as well. It's a little project for next year. Actually, not a little project, it's quite a big project.
I wonder, have you always been a boarder rather than a skier? Did you grow up boarding in Queenstown area in New Zealand?
No, I wish I did. Both my parents aren't skiers at all. I only went once to the mountains as a kid, as on a school trip, which I was always fascinated by the snow, actually. It was always something I always thought as a kid how cool it would be to live in the snow, despite not having spent any time in the snow, really. And I'm from the North Island, so our main ski area there is Mount Ruapehu. It's a big mountain in the middle of the North Island there, if you're not familiar with it. So that's where I spent. I did a couple of winters there when I was 21, 22, around that age, and then just fell in love with it, and then got a one-way ticket to the US and worked there for the winter, then went on to Canada for a couple of years, and then off to Europe, and then Japan. And over the next sort of 5-6 years, was chasing the winters pretty hard there for a while through my 20s, which is awesome. I loved it. It was awesome. Did a number of different jobs and different things throughout that period, and it was awesome. A real sort of dirtbag traveling, not traveling on the high life, sort of, staying in backpackers and staying at mates. And as you do when you're young, you can get away with it a lot more.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, you remind me of my days in New Zealand when I was in my 20s, when you were probably in nappies or something. And I didn't have long enough in New Zealand to sort of see it all myself without jumping on the bus, the Kiwi experience.
Yes, I know it well.
Still have that?
Yes, they do. It's super popular. And there's a number of buses that have all sort of grown from the popularity of Kiwi experience.
So I only had enough time to do that and whiz around the place. And I mean, it was an incredible and beautiful country, and ticked off the awesome foursome and all that.
Nice. No, it's a beautiful country.
Got the video of me doing the bungee jump on the pipeline bridge.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and it was great because, when you get those kind of things done, there's a lot of fluff, on the video, and then they insert the little bit of you jumping, and then there's a load more fluff.
Yep.
But because I was so scared, and I was the first to go in the day, they made me go first. All the people who were on the bus, they were all
20 minutes of
shouting
standing
my
on the
name.
bridge.
But when I came up from the toilet, literally nearby, because I was literally shitting myself, and they were all going, Gavin, Gavin.
Yeah.
So I had to go first, and I was they said you have to go first because you're the heaviest, because I'm a big fella,
Yeah.
And for some reason that seemed to make sense to me. But anyway, I stalled so many times that the insert of me jumping off the bridge took about 12 minutes or something, trying to reason my way out of it. But
nice.
Fun times. Okay, so you made a home from shipping containers in Tasmania.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, without telling us the whole story, what did you get from that experience? What's the best thing about doing that, and what's the worst thing about doing that?
What's the best and the worst? That's a good question. The best, I think I learned a lot actually through that. I mean, I'm quite a handy sort of a guy. I can figure out most sort of DIY projects, but that sort of definitely honed a few more skills that I probably didn't have prior to that project. So I'd say that was probably one of the highlights. One of the things at the time was actually one of the worst things, and this was during, sort of peak COVID, was just delays on everything. Like the time it would take would be anywhere from maybe 8 to 12 weeks just for simple things. Even at one point, we ran out of standard framing timber. I just tried to get some 3x2 and 2x4 from the local hardware. And they're like, no, we don't have any, not for like 2 or 3 weeks. I'm like, what? I'm just after a few pieces of timber here. And yeah, that was blowing me away just how hard that was to get. And yeah, obviously sticking to a budget's quite a hard thing to do sometimes as well, especially when the missus is in control of the interior design. So there was some bit of conversations on what we should do internally and whatnot, but we managed to get it over the line. I think all up was just over $60,000 for the total fit out and on both containers, and a nice little deck off the front as well. So it's come up pretty good actually in the end. We're pretty happy with it.
And did you come up with loads of ingenious space-saving ideas and things folding out and all the rest of it?
No, I didn't go too crazy on that. I mean, I've seen a few videos where they try and cram as much as they can into a 20-footer. We've got a 40-foot high cube and a 20-foot just regular size. Look, we did maximize our space pretty efficiently, and we gave it a good day or two's thought of the layout, and then I just got stuck into it. Took about 4 months building, pretty much. That's including the deck, and I was on it most days, pretty steady. I took off for 1 month's work in the middle of that, but yeah, it was about 3 or 4 months all up to build it.
Maybe a naive question, but what I always think about container homes is temperature control. Don't they get awful hot in the heat?
Not too bad. Tazzy's quite a nice temperature. Even in winter, everyone sort of knocks Tazzy for being, it's all cold, why we want to live down there. But coming from New Zealand, it's not too bad. And I like the cold, so it's okay. We insulated it as well. We put pink bats and I lined it internally. So that probably helps with a lot of that as well. And we've got a little log fire inside, just a tiny little fireplace, which heats the place so well, especially we had a newborn in there at that time. So my wife was paranoid that the place had to be warm. So we had this little fire just absolutely chockers throughout winter, and it was about 25 degrees in there or something. It was hot. So no, we haven't had any issues. And in summer, we spend a lot of time outside. We've got a nice big deck, so we quite often have dinners and things outside. It just gives you a bit more space. So no, we found it pretty good. We don't have aircon or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm glad you tell us that you've got a nice big deck without too strong a New Zealand accent.
Yes.
This would be X-rated.
True.
Okay, so let's talk about how I came across you, Neil. It was through like a network of YouTube value investors that we both know.
Yep.
One of whom is Karan Mohan, eToro's Karan, and a bunch of other guys, Brad Kellner, stock compounder, Tom from Investing with Tom, all those guys who are now associated with a collective called Punchcard Investing.
Which is very good.
Yeah, and they all get together and discuss stock ideas, and they're all very dyed-in-the-wool value investors. It's fair to say.
Yes, very much so.
And I was watching a few videos of you, and I think I heard you on the Investing with Tom podcast, and he was asking about your journey and how you got into everything. And it sounds like we've read a ton of the same books, starting off with things like The Barefoot Investor, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Those are kind of good ones to, get your brain turned on to the ideas in the first place. And then graduating on to books by investors like Phil Town, Howard Marks, Peter Lynch, Monish Pabrai, your hero, Guy Spear, whose hero is also Monish Pabrai, I think. And obviously OGs like Buffett and Munger.
Yeah.
So that sort of sets the scene for, where you come from in an investing sense, I think it's fair to say.
Yep, definitely.
Don't really have a question on that. I'm just talking relentlessly. But yes, you've done very well financially early in life. It seems to be able to build up this property portfolio. I know you do work occasionally in oil and gas, as little as possible, because it's hard, grimy work, you describe it as. And you're doing all these cool things. It's just, you're an outdoorsy kind of guy. You've got the ski lodges. You did a self-build. It's a great story. That's why I always thought you're the kind of person that a lot of eToro users, especially the younger guys, would aspire to be like. If you're there and you're like 20 years old and you're in college or whatever, you're thinking, what do I want out of life? They hear your story and they're like, that's what I want. Click copy.
Yeah, I suppose that's a way to look at it.
So good on you. Okay, tell us something you're very bad at. After telling us how great you are at DIY and setting up businesses in foreign countries and all the rest of it, let's hear about the other side of the coin. What are you hopeless at?
Yeah, there's definitely a few things I'm not so flash at. But I think one of the big things for me that I'm not good at is actually switching off. This is a bit of a cliche thing maybe sometimes, but I do find it quite hard to actually switch off sometimes and just sleep or whatever. Like my mind is constantly on something, and then sometimes that's a bit of a downside because I might have too much on the go and I can't do anything well because I've got so many things I'm trying to do, and that's quite the problem that I sort of have to. I mean, it's a good problem, I guess, but that's something I need to manage a bit better.
Have you got any management techniques for that?
Yeah, my wife's always telling me, "Oh, you need to write stuff down and all this," and which I have actually been doing a lot more of that, especially this last sort of year or two, writing lists and things, which helps sort of channel the energy sometimes, which definitely helps. So that's probably one thing that and also like, I asked my wife this as well. I was curious to see what she would say. Would something, things that I'm not good at, and she rattled off a long list. No, it wasn't that bad. No, and another thing which would be, I'm always keen to jump into something without sometimes maybe looking at the whole picture. Maybe I'll jump in and keen to get stuck into something, and then maybe not complete the whole task. I mean, I do complete things as well, but I'm always keen to move on to the next task and the next task, whatever that may be, project, business, investing, whatever it may be. That's also another downside, which I'm currently working. But I think it works well with me and my wife. She sort of reins me in a few times, which is good as well.
Going back to the issue of quietening the mind, a lot of your heroes, Phil Town and Monish and people like that, and Howard Marks, I think as well, are all proponents of meditation. Have you tried to do that in your own life, try and quieten the mind?
I haven't per se. Like we spent a bit of time in Nepal a few years back, and I did a little bit there, but that's the only time I've ever sort of dabbled in it, I guess. But for me, like snowboarding and these sort of activities, and you mentioned that you're a keen diver as well, even diving, these sort of activities for me actually channel my mind to that. I'm focusing on just that at that time, which is kind of my meditation, I would almost say. I'm very in that moment whilst I'm doing that activity. I'm not thinking of everything else and things I need to do. And so that's sort of I suppose you could say, a form of meditation. But no, I don't sit down and meditate. But maybe it's something I should look at. I think. I mean, I've heard a lot of podcasts and people that rate it very highly.
It's not for everyone, I'm sure, though. You have to be. Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a meditator myself, but I agree with what you say. When you're doing lots of things that you really enjoy, that maybe don't require a great deal of brain power, physical things, like diving, for example. It's a physical activity, but you're just enjoying the surroundings and being in the water and all the sights and interacting with nature. I mean, that has a huge number of healthful qualities for the mind and body.
Just anything outdoors, I find is good for the soul. For everybody, I think if it's good, keeps you level, keeps you grounded. I think spending time outside.
Okay, let me ask you a question from the art of people. If you can give me a number between 1 and 10, which isn't 7.
Let's go with 5.
Probably quite appropriate for a person of your nature. Number 5. What is the most exciting thing in your personal life right now?
Oh, we're about to kick off the winter season here in Japan, so that's pretty exciting. 2 lodges that are not fully booked up, but there are definitely a lot of bookings coming in, which is good to see after 2 quiet years. So that's exciting. And taking my son snowboarding, that's going to be pretty exciting as well. I bought him a little snowboard and some kit the other day, so I'm pumped to take him up there with me. He's probably a little bit young for it, but he'll be right.
Okay, Neil, let's turn to your profile on eToro. If I could ask you to read a little bit from your bio, maybe the section investing strategy with the bullet points, and then jump down to the bold heading section.
For sure, man. So my overall investing strategy is no leverage or leveraged ETFs, investing for the medium to long term, identifying great opportunities after deep research, expect a concentrated portfolio with high conviction positions. I stay on top of the news and developments in all of my investments. You can always copy me with the eToro minimum copy amount. Risk will be managed with a capital preservation as a key priority. Rule 1, don't lose money. And just a little bit about my profession. Japanese tourism business / investor, education, grad cert in business studies. Location, we touched on this a bit earlier, but originally from New Zealand, but living between Australia and Japan. I recommend to copy all open trades even when adding funds. Hobbies, snowboarding, mountain biking, diving, travel. Cheers.
Very good. I was trying to work out what MTB meant. Now I can see mountain biking.
There you go. That's what the cool kids are calling it.
What does the T stand for? TIN?
I don't know. It's just what the acronym for mountain bike is. It's huge in Tasmania at the moment. Mountain biking's really sort of put Tazzy on the map, actually, in Australia.
Funny you should say put Tazzy on the map. When I first travelled to Australia, I learned the expression map of Tazzy. You know what that is?
No.
Oh dear. Well, I don't know how I have to explain it, but I don't know if this is going to make the recording, but
carry on then.
If you see a naked woman from distance, her pubis area is described as the map of Tazzy.
I see.
Inverted
No, I
triangle.
had not heard that.
Map of Tazzy, mate. Saw the map of Tazzy.
Yeah, that's not a bad accent.
Okay. Right, let's talk about some of these elements of your bio. As we touched on earlier, you're value investor. You come from that sort of school, long-term, looking for good entry prices, reasons why companies are being undervalued on the market, all that good stuff.
Yep.
Just one point, it says you can always copy me with the eToro minimum copy amount. I looked into that, and that means you cannot have any trades below 0.5% of your portfolio. And I did spot a few just below that, a couple of Intel, which are 0.49.
Ah, I see. Okay.
So you've got to watch out for that. You've just lipped below the required amount. Other than that, there's a link in your bio to your YouTube channel. I'm not sure which, maybe it's the main video of that. Is there like an intro video on your YouTube channel? Is that what that links to?
I think so. I'd have to go back and double check actually what that links back to.
Well, the only problem is links aren't live in the eToro bio. So there's this big long text link that you can't even copy and paste. So is someone really going to write, /channel/capital U say CK, V, K, etc. So you could just say my YouTube channel, the Adventurous Investor, that would find you.
Yes, I should do that. I'll remove it.
And of course, your YouTube channel exists. We'll talk about it later, but it predates all your interest in eToro. It's full of all sorts of stuff. It's really interesting, and you've got a good few thousand subscribers, and it's worth checking out for investing and sort of life inspiration stuff as well. All very positive. You're a very positive go-getter kind of can-do guy. At this stage, I always say, let's talk about your results on eToro.
Yes.
In order to do so with you, we can't really do so without talking about the fact that, as we mentioned earlier, I said you should come on to eToro. You'd be great. People, young eToro users would love you. You're selling the dream, all of that stuff.
Yep.
You've got a YouTube channel already where you talk a lot about investing.
Yep.
I think you're tailor-made for eToro in many ways. So then you join. And as you say, that was in July of last year. And of course, since July of last year, it's been an absolute shit show.
That's a good way to put it.
Especially for an investor like you, who's not going to be, trying to chase market movements and things like that. You're buying companies and then you're sitting on them and waiting for the theses to play out.
Yes.
So in that context, for half of 2021, you finished -5%. And here we are in December, and year to date in 2022, you're looking at dogs barking.
Yeah.
-18.66% currently.
Yeah.
Aided by an incredible November.
Yes.
And December has started off pretty well too. So not an easy introduction to eToro.
Definitely not. Not a good timing, let's say. There wasn't much going on in July 2021. I couldn't find many opportunities either at the time, from memory. And we can talk about it later, but I was quite concentrated on Chinese equities and still are, probably over. Need to reduce, I think, some of the exposure to China, to be fair.
Right. So it's fair to say you haven't exactly hit the ground running on eToro.
No.
But, you're a long-term kind of guy.
Yeah.
It's not like you're joining eToro because you're expecting it to take off straight away. You've got plenty of other things going on in your life. So I guess you're quite happy to see how it goes, the experiment, over the next couple of years.
For sure. Yeah, no, definitely.
Another question I have written here is, have you found anything surprising about eToro?
Nothing overly surprising, I wouldn't say. I do like the functions of the whole copy trading and everything. That's something very unique to eToro. I don't know. I'm not aware of any other platform that offers that similar, style to copying other people, which is very unique to eToro, I feel. But as far as brokerage platforms go, it's pretty standard, I feel, across. I've used a number of different brokerage platforms over the years, and the interface is easy. It's fairly straightforward. Even if you have limited knowledge on brokerage accounts, it's fairly easy to find your way around and deposit funds, withdraw funds, and place trades. Maybe the biggest downside for me was the lack of like Australian equities or anything like that. Predominantly, it's just US equities, and then a few ADRs, and obviously for the Chinese equities as well. So that's probably one of the downsides, I would say, for me personally. But depends where you are in the world. That might not be a big thing for you. But for me, there has been a few times where I've gone to look up for a particular stock and it's not on the platform.
Yeah, so you're missing your A2 milk.
My good old A2 milk. Oh my goodness, that hasn't been a home run, that one. I'm still holding that though. But it's funny, the companies that I've been most vocal about, especially on the YouTube channel, have been the worst performers across my entire portfolio. Both A2 and Alibaba have been. Their thesis is still playing out, hopefully.
Okay, well, we'll come on to that in the next section. For now, let's just keep running through these main metrics.
Yep.
The risk score is something that you wouldn't see on other brokerages.
Yes, very true, actually.
Your risk score is kind of, I suppose, 6, average and max of 6, you would say, overall, over the last 12 months. Everyone's risk score has gone up in this last year. Is that something you pay attention to at all?
It is. I'm not 100% what I like. I mean, I've looked over the briefly, like what entails, how they calculate the risk score, but it seems a bit mystical sometimes. Like I haven't changed much throughout my investing time on eToro, yet I've gone from like a 3 or a 4, and then one point I was at 7, and there was a lot of volatility in the market, which obviously affects your risk score, I guess. So yeah, it's not super clear cut to me how they actually assess that.
It would possibly be more clear cut if it was called a volatility indicator, which is really what it is.
Very much so. Yeah. Look, I don't know how to sort of make it look any better, or what I can do to change that. Maybe just invest in ETFs and that have minimal volatility, and you'd have a low risk score, I'd imagine. But especially the nature of my portfolio, and anyone that has a concentrated portfolio, and you're going to have big swings either side, as we've seen from November. I mean, a couple of months prior to that was down 30%, and they were up 30%. That's probably not helping the risk score, I'd imagine.
Yeah, September -16, October -16, November +32. That's some volatility right there.
Very much so.
Okay, copier numbers and assets under copy. Shouldn't take us too long to get through this section.
I can get through that one pretty quickly again.
Copier numbers, 0.
Yes.
Assets under copy, also 0.
0. That is correct.
Let's move on. The next thing I like to talk about is PI's attitude to adding funds.
Yep.
But it applies to you as well, because you're a dyed-in-the-wool investor. Buffett will tell you to get out there, when others are fearful, and get out there with your wash tub, not your thimble, and all these other great nuggets of wisdom. So have you been buying since the prices have come down considerably of your positions?
Not the last, actually, no, last month. I also have another brokerage account with Interactive Broker.
You're not allowed to mention anyone else.
Oh, okay, sorry. Through eToro, I haven't actually been buying anything these last few months, but on other brokerage sites I have been.
Trades per week and average holding time. I'm sure those stats will tell the story of a long-term value investor. Trades per week, 1.5. Average holding time, 13 months. So not exactly day trading.
Definitely not.
Do you use the watchlist function on eToro? And if so, what does your watch list look like?
Hang on, I'll just bring it up. I've got a few that I've got here on the watch list. At the top of the list, I've got Walt Disney, actually. Walt Disney, Vail Resorts, Netflix, Visa, Micron, and then a lot of the FANG stocks. Obviously, they've dropped off a fair bit recently. In particular, Google. That's one I've sort of been looking at a bit recently. Google and Amazon, Apple, and also other positions I actually hold. They're still just on my watch list as well. Alibaba and Seritage and Thor Industries. it's on there because Tom quite often refers to Thor Industries. I haven't actually made an investment in Thor Industries, but they are interesting. Sprouts Farmers Market, Intel, JD, Nintendo, Process, and Meta.
Interesting. As you run through that list, I have flashes of people's faces coming up in my head thinking, oh, I know who's invested in that. I know who's invested in that. As we're going to talk about in the next section, you're a big fan of 13Fs and cloning and all the rest of it.
Yep.
But before we get on to that, let's double back a little bit and talk about communication. Now, everything we're talking about is kind of in the context of you haven't really got started on eToro. I mean, you have with your portfolio, but sort of because of circumstances, you're not a PI, you're not communicating with copiers and everything. But let's talk about your YouTube channel because that is your principal means of communication.
Yep.
You've got an eToro intro video. I'm not sure if maybe that's what you linked to from your bio, where you talk.
It probably would be actually.
Right, where you talk about your background in investing and all the things that inspired you. And it ends up with you going free diving for some sort of shellfish.
That's correct. Yes, abalone actually.
Which is just was it abalone?
Yeah,
and you crack it open with your knife and probably nibble it on the rocks in your wetsuit.
No, I'm not that hardcore, but it's a great little spot actually. You can guarantee you get the quota every time, and within 15, 20 minutes you quota out. So it's awesome, and it's on my doorstep. So I go down there a lot, especially in summer.
Fantastic. And let's have a little look at your YouTube channel. I was going to describe it. I thought I'd made some notes. But there are quite a lot of PIs who've chosen adjectives to go with the word investor. There's the popular investor, the approachable investor. You are the adventurous investor. But you've been that long before eToro came on your radar. How long have you had your channel?
Yeah. I started it in June 2020, I think it was. June, July. I'd have to double check that actually. Yeah, about mid 2020, I think.
And so there's loads of investing content, more investing content than anything else.
Predominantly, yeah.
The people that I mentioned earlier, the authors of those books, they appear in many of the thumbnails. Manish Pabrai, Howard Marks, Guy Spear, Munger, Buffett.
Yeah. Good lineup.
Yeah, so there's loads of video, there's loads of investing content recently. If you go back further in time, there's more about sort of your life and the container homes and starting a business in Japan and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So is the objective of your YouTube channel to sort of inspire others or just to chronicle your experience for yourself? Or what is it really?
It's a bit of everything, really, to be honest. It was more in 2020. I was stuck inside with all the lockdowns we had in Australia, so I had a lot of time on my hands. And then I sort of got onto YouTube, and I hadn't really watched much YouTube before, to be honest, other than a few snowboarding clips here and there. But then sort of got stuck down the rabbit hole of all the great investing content on there, and thought, I might chip my 2 cents in here as well. And it sort of just went from there. Some of my early videos are horrific quality-wise. I sort of just threw them up and went with it. Even now, some of the latest ones aren't that polished, to be fair. Which is a work in progress, I guess. I've actually been a bit quiet on there the last few months. I've been too busy here in Japan to sort of focus much time on the channel. But I imagine once the winter finishes up here in Japan, I'll get back in there and try and get a bit more content out there. But I do enjoy it. I've made some good friends from the YouTube community, and it's interesting the way when you're talking to a camera, you really start to realize whether you know what you're talking about or not. It's quite a difficult thing when you're first starting out. Actually, I found the first couple of videos on tripping up on my words, and doesn't come naturally. Some people it might do. For me, it didn't. So, but no, I do enjoy it. I've spent a lot of time on there actually the last sort of couple of years. It's sort of just a bit of a hobby, I guess, on the side.
And do you think if we fast forward to mid 2024, you've got hundreds, possibly thousands of copiers on eToro. Do you think you're going to be using? You think you're going to be using your YouTube channel as a principal means of communication with them?
Yes, I definitely think I would actually. I mean, I quite like Karan's updates he does. That's pretty much all he does now on his channel. But I watch them, and they're nice and short and sweet. And I think it's a great way to keep in touch with your copiers. Like especially through rough times. I think people might be getting a bit nervous or, oh, what's happening? I'm losing money or whatever. I think that would be probably the time that you'd want to be the most active almost. Even though it might be the most difficult time because your portfolio might be down 20% or 30, 50, whatever it might be down. But I think that's when you'd probably want to be the voice to your copiers to reassure them that you're staying the course or what you're doing, what you're planning on doing or not doing through those sort of turbulent times.
Do you copy?
Do you copy?
Do you copy?
Do you copy?
Copytraders Club.
Copytraders Club.
Do you copy?
Do you copy?
Do you copy?
Do you copy? Copytraders Club.
Copytraders Club.
Okay, Neil, let's move on to your portfolio now, if we can. Let me just describe to the listener your asset class allocation. Stocks, 94% approximately. ETFs, 6%. And cash position, effectively zero currently. As you say, you haven't added any funds in recent times. Do you think you might?
I am thinking I might. I do have some money set aside actually that I was thinking about putting it into the eToro brokerage account.
Because as we'll come on to, some of your positions are quite heavily down.
Very much so. That's why I was thinking of putting some money back.
As we touched upon before, it's a feature of your investing style that you invest in things that other famous investors invest in. You're a big fan of 13F season. It's called cloning. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that approach?
I definitely like drawing inspiration from some of the best investors in the world, essentially. From the 13Fs, you can gain a lot of insight to what they're currently looking at or investing in or selling out of. So it's a great place, a great sort of hunting ground to look for ideas if you're struggling for ideas. Not entirely, actually. Like, especially in Australia, I mean, we don't have 13Fs here in Australia. So I don't do anything similar to that here in Australia. But for overseas investments, which I've only really started diving into myself, investing internationally, probably the last sort of 3 years. Prior to that, it was predominantly just in my backyard, Australia, New Zealand. I never sort of cast the net any wider. And now it's only the last sort of few years that I've sort of built up the knowledge and the confidence, let's say, to cast the net a bit wider.
Well, let me list some of these positions according to your invested column. Top of the list is Alibaba, and then we have Prosus, Meta, JD, and then the ETF, MCHI, which is monitoring the China index. 4 out of those top 5 are all Chinese equities: Baba, JD, the ETF, and of course Prosus, which is a proxy for Tencent, even though Prosus is listed in the Netherlands.
Yeah, correct.
You got a lot riding on China going well.
I do. Too much, to be fair, actually. And I think I'm going to start looking at maybe trimming back some of my exposure to China. I'm still definitely bullish on China on the long term. But I think let's say if you're looking at it from a copier standpoint, it's probably overexposed to Chinese equities. So I think if you were looking at copying, it might be a little too heavy on the Chinese side. That's probably one of the biggest downsides, I'd say, from this portfolio at the moment. But at the time when I first started this portfolio, that was the only sort of opportunities I could sort of find at that time. This is sort of middle of last year. Everything else was, in my sort of thoughts, was quite overpriced at that point in time. And that was sort of the only place I was sort of finding anything of significant sort of value at, well, what I perceived to value at that time. And I, to be fair, haven't really changed much of the portfolio. Tweaked a few things here and there, sort of averaged down on Meta over the last sort of 6 months, let's say, 6 to 12 months probably. But predominantly the core holdings within this portfolio are all those Chinese equities, which was sort of purchased, I think, from memory, around, that sort of mid to late 2021.
A lot of people are talking about, China's going to open up very soon. That's going to be something that boosts the world economy and all the markets. And obviously China itself will do great if that happens.
Yes.
So such a binary outcome to be sort of hanging on.
Yes. I think there's still a lot of room for growth within those companies. Like they're still at fairly attractive prices. Any sort of Chinese equities at the moment, well, the big Chinese equities, I don't know about any of the smaller stuff, but they're definitely not an overvalued territory, I wouldn't think.
Well, if they're going to be allowed the environment in which to flourish.
To flourish, for sure. That's the big if.
Seritage is something that I own from this list currently, outside of eToro.
Nice.
From back in the days when I'm sure we were consuming all the same stuff.
Yeah.
And, I watched Guy Spear. He was buying in the 40s happily, thinking it was going to be a great opportunity. Yeah. And then it dropped to like single digits and around the 10 mark and things. And, I'd heard of it so much and all these estimates of the value and the dirt value, as Phil Town would say. In fact, that's when I sort of got to know Brad a little bit, just online, sharing with him things that I'd heard Phil Town saying in his podcast with his daughter about Seritage.
It's a great podcast.
He was starting to piece together the whole Seritage story, Brad. But it's been a really uncomfortable and disappointing experience being invested in Seritage.
Yeah, it's not a big position for me, both in this portfolio and outside of this portfolio as well. I did sell a few put options on it last year, which are still waiting. That they're probably not going to get assigned, I wouldn't imagine. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I've followed along, like as you have with Brad and Tom, and they've done all the heavy lifting on majority of the valuations for all the properties. I think Tom actually went through every individual property through, I can't remember, there was a website in America that he went through and sort of to try to get a bit of a gauge on each property. And I think he's quite heavily invested. I think it may even be one of his largest positions at the moment, or has been in the past. So he's pretty invested in it.
But they're selling off at quite a clip at the moment.
At quite a clip, yes, for sure.
So where it all going to end for shareholders, nobody knows still.
Nobody knows, yeah. I mean, they're pegging between 18 and 29 a share. But it's hard one to play. But I think, the thesis has sort of changed, evolved over time. It's sort of, that wasn't the initial sort of story when we were first sort of getting into it, sort of a year or two ago, or year and a half back, whenever it may have been. Things have sort of evolved and changed a bit over that time.
It's funny, the whole cloning thing, or, listening to famous investors talking about their ideas and then finding yourself joining in with them. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with it, more uncomfortable with it than you are. I know you have to do all your own work and everything, but, I sort of worry that if a bunch of investors are in a particular position, and Seritage is a great example because there was a whole ton of them, and you're thinking, how can all these 6, 7 legends of the game, they can't all be wrong. I'm going to piggyback on these guys. Little old me, what do I know compared to them?
Yes, for sure.
So you sort of do kind of go in there with your hand being held. And when your hand's being held, it can create a sense of comfort that's maybe an illusion.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I 100% agree. It's definitely a trap to be wary of. And I think I definitely fell into that, especially with Bubba. I know myself, as you just mentioned, everyone was jumping on Bubba, and especially Munger. Like Munger's, he doesn't do much, and then Munger's on it. So then you sort of, I don't know, even it's just maybe not even instinctively, it just sort of naturally happen. You sort of, like you say, you just feel more comfortable knowing that the big boys are sort of getting involved. It sort of gives you a bit of comfort, but I think it's an easy trap to fall into for sure.
Yeah, I mean, is the comfort real or is it false comfort?
I agree with what you're saying there, 100% actually. And especially with Seritage, I don't know if this happens or not, but is everyone, if Phil Town sees Charlie Munger or anyone sort of, then they all start sort of same sort of thing. Do they start feeling a bit more comfortable? Monish Babai invest in something, then Guy Spear, if Monish is, then everyone else sort of starts, creating this bit of a flywheel of everyone sort of copying everyone sort of thing. I don't know. It's obviously they're all doing their own work, but I know Monish jokes about it a lot when he says he talks to Munger, if God says this and God says that. He obviously puts a lot of stock into anything that Munger sort of says as well.
Yeah, but I mean, echo chambers are real, aren't they? I mean, even if you take it back to the guys we talked about earlier, all those Punchcard guys, they've read all the same books, they've got all the same input. They're all saying, I'm a contrarian. It reminds me of that Monty Python's Flying Circus, The Life of Brian. We're all individuals. Yes, we are all individuals. I'm not. Like they're all saying, we are all contrarians. Yes, we are all contrarians, as they agree with each other.
Yes. No, it's yeah. No, it's an interesting space. But yeah, I don't know if I'd be putting my entire net worth into any cloning position these guys out there that just shamelessly clone, don't even just boom, 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 boom. And some have done quite well out of it. Even there was there's a study, if you just pretty much clone Buffett over 20 odd years, he would have outperformed. I don't know how that would currently hold up today, but I can't really remember the time period that was conducted, but it's definitely a strategy. I think it's good to use, good to get ideas, but definitely don't just blindly follow.
Interesting you mentioned the timeline there, because of course other studies tell you that the best way to make serious returns is to die or forget about your investments. Those are the accounts that do the best.
The Magellan study, wasn't it? Where the best guys died or forgot if they had an account or whatever it was.
Well, that brings us on to another thing that happened when I was talking to Frank from Investing with Frank, who's one of the Punchcard guys. I spoke to him about the same time as I spoke to you about eToro and said, Frank, why don't you get on eToro?
Mm.
And he said he didn't want to because he felt there were too many impetuses which would sway him away from his investing style.
Right.
Long-term value. Buffett talks about the institutional imperative that hedge fund managers are under because their customers are saying, swing you bum, that story about the baseball player.
Yeah.
And the great advantage that we have is that we don't have to swing because there's nobody watching our every move. On eToro, people are watching your every move.
Yes.
Copiers have a short time horizon. They want to see results in the short term, medium term, and long term.
Mm.
Copiers aren't going to hang about for 20 years for your theses to compound. If 18 of those 20 years look horrific and then the last 2 are amazing, they won't be there to see that. And that's a difficulty with being a value investor on eToro. You see it with Karan's copier numbers, how they go up when things are good, and then they don't have the patience to hang about. They don't buy in fully into the long-termism, which is, I think, true of copiers generally. Very difficult to get them to hang around.
stay for the long term. Yeah.
Is that something you're aware of, or do you have any particular ideas to tackle that in your eToro career as you go forward?
Yeah, obviously I'll always keep with the long-term sort of focus in mind there. That's just sort of the way I naturally sort of am anyway. It's not, but yeah, I understand where sort of Frank's coming from there as well. Even for myself, actually, I found that when I opened up eToro, opened up that account, I sort of thought, I need to be doing something. I can't just have this money sitting there, which is funny. Like I've never sort of felt that before, really. Like, I've never I've not had money in a brokerage account and thought, I should really be doing something with this. I sort of felt like I needed to invest some of it somewhere. And at the time, that's where the Chinese sort of equities were looking the most value. So I can kind of understand where Frank's coming from there a little bit on that. But yeah, I wouldn't say I'm all of a sudden going to start day trading just to keep the interest or selling out of positions or anything like that. I definitely wouldn't go down that road at all. But I think I probably would maybe be a bit more active if I was getting copiers. And I'd have to give it a lot more thought on my allocation as well. I wouldn't be as exposed to China as I would be right now if I had copiers. Because there is risk there, and people might not be comfortable with that risk. So, I mean, myself, I'm comfortable with that risk. I'm young. If it goes to zero, I'm not happy about it, but I can ride that wave and move forward. Where other people, you might not be comfortable with that risk. So I would probably reduce my exposure to China and, try and get a bit more exposure in the US equities.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because you might have very clear ideas about the best way to invest, but is it the best way to popular invest?
That is correct. Yeah, it is. It's do you play into the game a bit and tailor your investing just on this platform to get copiers? I imagine a lot of people probably do that, and even myself, maybe if I started getting a few copies, I don't know. I don't know. I'd have to wait till I get to that time. If I was to get a few copies, I'd have to manage it myself and have to dedicate a lot of time to it and thought, and probably have to put in some pretty stringent checklists, I'd imagine, to just keep myself on track a little bit, because I know people are sort of relying on me a lot more, and ideally I wouldn't want to disappoint. And then I would try and keep up to date a bit more, like Karan does with his monthly videos. I think that's pretty important for his copiers as well, to keep people up to date, especially like we mentioned earlier, through those sort of turbulent times. That's when people would probably want the voice, the what you're planning or what you're thinking of doing through those times.
On the subject of copiers then, who should copy Neil Denize?
Anyone with a sort of long-term sort of time frame. Definitely no one that's wanting to get in and try and make a quick buck in a couple of months or anything like that. Definitely, I'm not your guy for that 100%. Anyone that's sort of wanting to look for, definitely investing for the long term, minimum 12 months, I would say, minimum. Like you say, no one sort of thinks long term on eToro, but yeah, I would say minimum 12 to 5 years. That would be the ideal sort of, and more with a value sort of based. But as things sort of progress over the next sort of year or two, we may see a lot of these sort of growth companies start coming into a good range, which I wouldn't be opposed to, investing into some more of these sort of growth companies at reasonable price, obviously at the right price point, and sort of some long-term positions to stay in the portfolio for a number of years. Whereas these Chinese equities that are currently sitting in there, I don't know if I'd want to hold those for forever, as Buffett would say. If they got up to even close to where I think they sort of should be valued, I would look at trimming them back quite substantially, I feel.
You sort of touch on something that I think is at least a way of approaching it for someone who comes from your school of investing, if you like, is that you can have a core of long-term holds, coffee can under the bed, sit there for 8 years, and then, another portion of the portfolio that's, on a shorter time scale, and you're happy to enter and trim and play with. But then there's always that core that's sacrosanct, and that's you and all the books you've read sticking to your guns.
Yeah, I think that would be a great way to do it. I mean, you'd have to give some thought to around your allocation of like maybe you have 50% in your sort of long-term holdings, or even more, maybe 75%, and then you've got your 25% that you sort of move in and out of a little bit more. But I wouldn't be getting in on the hot Tesla or, whatever's the flavor of the month, whatever it was that month, whatever Meet Kevin's spoken or whatever.
Solid investments with perhaps a shorter time horizon.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe there's something that's, as things just, as the markets have been, especially these last couple of months, like Chinese equities have gone, like Process, for example, was down close to 40 euros, and now it's back up to close to 60 euros within the space of not even a month, I think, maybe. It's incredible, the swing there. Fundamentally, nothing's really changed with the business. It's just the way it is.
So, Neil, what makes you so special?
What makes me so special? Good question. When it comes to investing, I think I have a fairly level head. Well, not just investing, just in general. I can maintain pretty calm. And even in stressful situations, some people would say, I can remain pretty sort of steady. So I think that's quite a good trait when it comes to investing as well. Especially come the turbulent times, that we can really sort of test a lot of people. If they haven't been through a downturn or anything like that, some people will sell at the bottom. Even last year, 2020, I had some friends that were liquidating, like out of their entire portfolios or their supers in Australia as the retirement fund. They were taking it all and putting it into cash and all these crazy things, which, it was funny to see, witness that sort of firsthand. So I think that's probably one of my strong points, would be my level head. And quite a diverse background as well. I think it's probably worked in a number of different fields and travelled quite extensively. So I sort of have views of a lot of the world, travelled to a lot of different countries, which opens your eyes a bit to a lot more international sort of things, and I'm a lot more comfortable with different countries, whereas some people might not be comfortable investing in China or, especially coming from New Zealand, you're a bit sheltered from the rest of the world. If you don't leave New Zealand, New Zealand's great. It's an amazing country, so people don't want to leave sometimes, and I totally understand. You don't realise how good it is until you travel sometimes. So I think that's probably another strength as well.
Yeah, you've done a lot of living for your years. How old are you?
37.
37. Oh, you're getting on now.
Yeah. Still young. Still got it.
Well, that's what I was thinking about saying, I really, because I live in Asia, right? And I used to ski and snowboard every year when I lived in Europe, like in my 20s. Every year would head to the Alps, and best times ever, amazing holidays. That whole, just the whole being in the mountains and the fresh air and getting up every day, hitting the mountains, it's fantastic. And then in the evenings, drinking your red wine and fondue and all the rest of it and having a good old laugh. And then waking up when you should feel rough after a night of carousing. But then as soon as the fresh air hits you, it's all, your head clears and you're back to hurtling down the side of the mountain at breakneck speed. Absolutely brilliant fun.
Yeah.
And I'd love to do it again. And I'd love to bring my family to Japan sometime. It'd be amazing. Imagine going to your place and snowboarding in the powder there and all the rest. My only concern is whether my knees can take it at this at my current age, because my knees are not what they used to be. I gotta tell you.
Do you ski or board?
I mean, I would hesitate to say I board. I was primarily a skier, but if the circumstances allowed, I would board. Like there were a few times we went when it dumped down loads of snow, and some of the boys I was with were like, "Oh, this is boarding. We're all boarding from this point forward," and I couldn't, stick to the skiing, so I had to board. And if there's enough snow, it's incredible. If it's hard and compact and icy, I'm not boarding because, you catch an edge and, crack your skull on that. It's not very pleasant.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
If you're sliding down a powdery mountain, and it's nice and easy, it's absolutely gorgeous. Yeah.
Oh, it really is. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, well, we strayed a little bit from the subject there. Let's just close this out here with a few final questions. Not the final question.
Yep.
Penultimate. What other PI would you say you know best on a personal level?
I don't really know too many. Oh, like yourself, probably. Oh, and Karan, actually. Karan, I would, but not like I haven't met either of you in actual person, but I've watched a lot of Karan's content and through Punchcard as well, through YouTube. He chips in every week. Well, not every week, but he's quite often a feature on there. But other than that, and listen to your podcast. I've heard a few of you guys come through on there. But other than that, I wouldn't say I know any on a personal level, let's say.
Didn't I put you in touch with someone in Australia?
Oh, sorry, you did.
Stock up with Joe Milazzo.
Yes. I did briefly get in touch with him. He's got a number of videos not on YouTube. Was it YouTube?
Yeah, well, he has a whole website, stockupwithjoe.com. That's
right, he does too.
And he was helpful to you when you were looking at eToro.
He was actually, he was. We had a couple of emails go back and forth, I think, and I did check out a few of his videos on his website as well.
Okay, final question.
Yep.
Neil, what's the one question you wish I had asked you during this chat that I haven't?
One question I wish you'd asked. Okay. Ask about my son. No, that's going to sound a bit weird.
No, well, I've heard you talking about your son on your YouTube channel, and what an enthusiastic daddy you are, and what a great fella he is. And you mentioned already you want to take him snowboarding.
Yes.
But okay, so you can tell us whatever you want about your son, but can you include in that whether fatherhood and family and this sort of phase of your life is kind of going to slow down your breakneck speed of achievements that has happened so far?
It has, just naturally. It has slowed down, which is not a bad thing, to be honest. It was good. And it forces me to take a bit of a step back sometimes. But then still, which I'm shocking for sometimes, like even with spending time with my son, I'm still thinking about other things when I should be more in the moment, but it's hard for me to stay there sometimes. But then sometimes I definitely do get lost in the moment. I definitely love being a father. It's such a challenging, like it's such a challenging, but so rewarding. Like it sort of brings out really test you. I feel the best and the worst of you. You can really, I don't know. It's so hard to put into words. But no, I'm looking forward to this winter and taking him up on the hill. And I've been taking him to the swimming pool at least a couple of times a week now, so he's getting pretty comfortable in the water, floating around the place, and he's starting to talk a bit more now as well, which is quite funny. And we've just signed him up to the local Japanese daycare the last sort of month, last sort of 2-3 weeks now, and he's finally starting to take a bit of a shine to that now. He doesn't. He's not crying every time I drop him off, which was quite tough those first few times. But now he's happy to stay there. So
I would say if you enjoyed the first year and a half, then you're going to absolutely love the next few years, because they are looking back, if you ask me, they were the least good
Yeah. Oh, it's challenging. That's what I'm saying. There's some times I'm like, Jesus, like just sleep. Even last night, for example, he was awake. I'm like, buddy, because now we're all in the one room. We've got a little log cabin. It's another sort of tiny home we're living in for the winter, but we're all back into one room again. And yeah, he was rolling around, and then he was a bit teary, which he's been pretty good sleeping. But oh, come on, buddy, we've been through this. But no, definitely looking forward to being able to do a bit more with him, which I'm really enjoying right now. Being outside, even today, we just wander around. He follows me around, and whatever I'm doing, he wants to be part of it. If I'm building something or working on something, he's there right by my side usually.
Yeah, well, that's a kid who's going to have some amazing memories when he's older. That's for sure.
Yes, I don't think he knows quite how lucky he is sometimes. No, I would kill for what he's going to experience. Winters in Japan and so forth. Like that's like my dream childhood. Yeah. That's a good way to round it out, I feel.
A very good way to round it out. Neil, it's been a delight to have you at the Copytraders Clubhouse. Thanks so much for giving us your time.
Oh, awesome, mate. Thanks heaps for getting me on. It's been awesome talking to you. Hopefully do it again sometime.
Timing can play a very important role in life and success. And while Neil's eToro journey may not have begun at the optimum time, I wouldn't put it past him to ultimately succeed as a PI, just as he has so impressively in his many other ventures. Hope to meet him one day in the snow in Japan. That's all from me. See you on Discord and Facebook. Until next time we meet at Copytraders Club, I wish you many happy returns. Obviously, anything here in this podcast is for entertainment only, not financial advice. Do your own research. This is just generic chit chat. We don't know your individual circumstances, etc., and so forth.